Downing Street now. Let's go to Darren McCaffrey, who's there. So he mightn't be getting a fixed penalty notice, Darren, but does a Met Police investigation, does that impede Sue Gray in reporting and delivering that report?
Well, I think, first of all, Amy, we have to remember that this is the second time in a century that Downing Street and the Prime Minister is potentially being investigated by the police. It is a significant moment, and there is no doubt that this is a blow to people working behind those doors, that the police are investigating all of this. Is it going to impede Sue Gray's investigation? Apparently not. There was much rumour last night we could well see her report as early as this morning. Now that's looking increasingly unlikely, given the fact that Downing Street within the last hour have repeatedly said they have not yet received her report. Now that could happen later on today. It is clear that she is wrapping up her investigations into the parties that may well have taken place in Downing Street and indeed across Whitehall, and this is going to be the decision moment for lots of Conservative MPs, depending of course on what she says, a moment in which they're going to have to decide whether to back the Prime Minister or indeed to essentially sack the Prime Minister, to launch a leadership challenge against him. And I think in the end Conservatives are going to have to decide whether they think what went on in Downing Street is the fault of civil servants or indeed goes right to the top, whether Boris Johnson, having not necessarily organised these parties, created a culture in which they were allowed to happen, and whether trust amongst the British public has been damaged to such a degree that it is not possible to get it back, that people right across this nation simply do not believe or trust the Prime Minister anymore. Now, many Conservatives say we should be focusing on other things, like the cost of living crisis, on a potential war with Ukraine, and I think that will feed into whether they will, in the end, decide this is not the moment for a leadership challenge. But for many others, this is a moment in which Boris Johnson has to take, they would argue, responsibility for his actions.
OK, and it's being dubbed a very critical 48 hours for him. Just take us through that timeline, because, of course, he's got PMQs today where he'll have to answer questions from the Labour Party about this police investigation. And if the Sue Gray report is published this afternoon, the Labour Party are entitled to a certain amount of time, aren't they, to respond before he then appears in the Commons?
Yeah, indeed. So the thought process was, at least of last night, that this report may well get published later this morning. You're right to say the Labour Party are pretty insistent, and understandably so, that they want to get access to this report as soon as possible so that they are able to go through the detail of it before the Prime Minister stands up in the Commons. PMQs is at 12. That is not going to move. The rest of it is pretty movable in lots of ways, in the sense that the Prime Minister has promised he will come to the Commons, answer questions from MPs on this report specifically. Labour, as you say, wanting to see that so they can ask questions. MPs doing precisely the same. I think if it's not going to happen this morning, that could mean it is pushed into tomorrow, though, as I say, Downing Street insisted that as soon as it is published, they will come to the Commons to explain all the detail of this. There are also questions about how much will be published, Isabel, some suggesting it may well just be a summary, others that even if it is published in full, that some of it might be redacted, i.e. just blackened out lots of names and details of things, and that may lead the opposition and those that don't like Boris Johnson to say this is some type of cover-up if the full detail is not put into the public domain. This is fascinating politics. This is the moment in which I think Boris Johnson's future will ultimately be decided, and decided not by you and I, or indeed anyone else across the media, or anyone else across the nation. It will be decided ultimately by those Conservative MPs who will have to make the decision on Sue Gray's report about whether they want Boris Johnson to continue leading the Conservative Party and thus continuing to lead the country.
Darren, thanks for putting us in the picture. Appreciate that.